Do you think since he arrived in 2018 at Arsenal that he's remained the same player, or have you seen a change in his game from when he arrived from Borussia Dortmund till today?
It's a little hard to judge because the circumstances at Arsenal changed so dramatically from when he came in to where we are now. So obviously Arsene Wenger signed him one window after having signed Alexander Lacazette, which is a story more for an Arsenal podcast than this one. But and he came in, he hit the ground running, and he was really good right from the start, I felt. Really a shame that he was cup-tied in the Europa League, because I think we would have gone on to win the Europa League had he been able to play in that, but he couldn't. So he played great, but then Arsene Wenger leaves, Unai Emery comes in, and the football took a turn for the worse, especially from an attacking standpoint. Despite that, and despite often being played on the wing, on the left wing, he continued to be the leading goal scorer. He had consecutive 22-goal seasons in the league. And I think it's fair to say mostly beloved and appreciated for it. Big smile on his face, lots of goals. I don't know that he was always deployed in the best way possible or in the right way. And he wasn't used in the same way he was at Dortmund. We've seen some players struggle to adapt from Bundesliga life to Premier League life. I mean, Timo Werner could arguably be said to be a similar player in the sense of a lot of speed, running behind, scored a lot of goals, did it in the Bundesliga, not finding it so easy to do that in the Premier League. So there were adaptation issues. But again, 22 goals in consecutive seasons, you're not going to complain about that return. But along the way, there were things like a missed penalty in the North London derby against Tottenham that cost us beating them, and ultimately, you could say, cost us top four and a path back to the Champions League. There were missed sitters, which has always been a part of who he is and a part of any striker, but that stick in the memory that I think made it harder for people to really adore him because they cost us opportunities to get back to where we needed to go. And I think the last point I'd make about the playing style is just that from the left, he did a lot of tracking back defensively. He was often out on the touchline. He was often very peripheral. And while I think Aubameyang is a prolific goal scorer who has a unique preternatural ability to find space in the box to score goals, I don't think I'd say that he's a technical leader, that he is going to pick the right pass every time, that his touch is always going to be the cleanest when he's trying to beat a man off the dribble. And so putting him on the wing meant more crossing, more isolation, more attempts to link up with teammates, and that wasn't always as effective. But again, in any of this analysis is the question of whether Unai Emery and now Mikel Arteta ever really figured out how to unlock the Arsenal attack. I mean, Arteta has only sort of started to do it a little bit in recent months. So not the player he was at Dortmund, certainly past his prime, outside of his prime for a chunk of his time at Arsenal, but also I think contributory factors like coaching changes, tactical changes, and being forced to play out on the left muddy the water in terms of making a clear determination of his raw skill set.
Well, it's interesting when you look at his raw numbers. We talk about numbers, and if you simply just put it on a page, 163 games, 92 goals, 20 assists, plus a golden boot in just 4 years at Arsenal. So, I mean, immediately looking at those numbers, I start to ask, where does he fit into the pantheon of great Arsenal forwards? And yet he is seen with these, major issues with the sitters and the moments that Arsenal fans just wish they could have got a little bit more.
Well, I think much like with Mesut Ozil, you have to draw a bright line at the point that his next contract was given. And the two circumstances are eerily similar because you have a player who was performing at a super high level, got a new bumper deal, stopped performing at a high level, fell out with the manager, and became totally frozen out. They both went through that. Now you could say, is that a manager issue, not a player issue? That's a debate for another time. I think before the new contract, if he had just left, if they said, you know what, he's 31, we're not going to re-sign him, thank you for the work you've done, we're going to sell you now, he would have left, even having been there just the 3 seasons, with immense admiration and appreciation, because also he delivered an FA Cup trophy. That FA Cup was won basically because of Aubameyang. His goals against City and Chelsea. You talk about two teams to beat to get to an FA Cup final and win it. Doesn't get much harder than that, and he was really the guy who did it. But it happened in front of no fans, no stadium, and no open-top bus parade because of COVID. And as a result, I think it is almost a forgotten FA Cup, if that can exist. And also maybe because of the FA Cup success we'd had in recent time, fans had sort of moved on from it a little bit and wanted European glory, wanted to get back to the top of the Premier League table. So before the contract, hugely admired, given a difficult role with different coaches, still managed to excel, still managed to lead us to an FA Cup. Post-contract, diminishing goals, diminishing role, disciplinary issues, frozen out of the team. And the recency bias means that people are going to remember that. But what I will say, just social media is not necessarily indicative of too much, but just looking at the messages on social media, a lot of appreciative messages being sent to him on social media for his time at the club. I think he leaves under a bit of a cloud, but with people recognizing that there were good moments as well.
Well, I can tell you from a Barca perspective this season that if the Barca were to win the Europa League, that means back to the Champions League. And if they finish top four, which is more likely in the Liga, that also means Champions League football. So it's interesting that I think any trophy of any kind this season, obviously, which would only be the Europa League trophy, would matter a lot to Kool-Aid's moving forward. And you mentioned the manager, you mentioned what broke down. So he and Mikel Arteta, it seems like desperate, that being Aubameyang, to leave Arsenal, to terminate that contract, to get out. And it almost felt like he wanted to leave Arsenal even more than he wanted to come to Barcelona. And with his press conference today, kind of having to walk back the fact that he said in the past, especially in 2016, he said, for his granddad, I wanted to play for Real Madrid. He was Atletico Madrid fan. So Real Madrid was the team I wanted to play for, but he'd be happy. And, obviously he has to walk back that he'd be happy to his granddad would be proud he's playing for Barca now, of course. But once again, it just seems like Barcelona was the lifeline to get out of Arsenal more than it was this player that desperately wanted to play for Barcelona. So I do ask, what broke down in that relationship between he and Arteta? And of course, Arteta also coming from the same coaching tree, if you will, of Pep Guardiola. So I'm also wondering, jumping in there, were there even things that you think Arteta and Xavi might have in common that unfortunately might rear its ugly head again?
Hard to say. So I want to just take, add one caveat to your setup there, which is I think if this was purely about money and purely about getting out of Arsenal with no regard for where he went or what he'd be doing, he would have gone to Saudi Arabia because he could have kept the wages he was on, made more money.
Very true. Yep.
He's going to make less money now. I don't know how much less, but he's going to make less money by going to Barca than he would have had he finished his Arsenal contract or gone to Saudi Arabia.
Well, I think the number there is it was £350,000 and now it's £100,000. So it's about a third of what he was going to make. He left.
Having said that, I think there was a payoff from on Arsenal's side. Yeah. A big one. But, again, still, he's given up money to make this move.
Right.
Here's what's kind of interesting to me. He was a model citizen at Dortmund until he wasn't. And he wasn't right around the time that he wanted to move out of Dortmund. Now, a player you'll be familiar with, Ousmane Dembele, is his best friend. And Dembele got his move out of Dortmund by basically throwing a strop and, disciplinary issues at Dortmund towards the end that put them in a position where they felt they had to move him on. Aubameyang would certainly have seen how that worked, talked to Dembele. Dembele said, hey, I threw a tantrum. I got out of there. Why don't you try it? He did it. He got his move to Arsenal. Did he then decide, I'm sick of this no Europe thing. I'm going to become difficult to live with and I'll get my move? Well, the problem is he probably didn't count on two things. Mikel Arteta is perfectly fine to just say you're out of the team, goodbye, and not play him at all. Yeah. Not, a few starts or you're in and out of the team, like literally not play him at all. I don't think a lot of coaches would do that because you're punishing yourself as a coach too, right? When you take your best striker out of the team. But Mikel was willing to do that. And the other part of that is when he was trying to get out of Dortmund, he was still in his prime. And he's one of the most fearsome strikers in the world. Well, he's trying to get out of Arsenal on a $350,000 a week wage at 33 years old, no longer in his prime. The appetite for people to want to go in on that situation is different. Now you could say, well, he still engineered it. So if you want to be cynical, you could say that he did engineer his way out of Arsenal through a really rocky period and through a tremendous amount of challenges to himself and to his team. Or you could just say he just genuinely has trouble with discipline. I suspect that he does have some issues with punctuality. That seems to be pretty well reported. But I think the breakdown between Arteta and Aubameyang that caused this ultimate rift must have involved a series of much worse things. And it wouldn't surprise me if those things were sort of intentional to the extent that there was a thought in his mind that I can make this untenable and I can get a move. So, we'll never know. It's speculative. He came in and was a model citizen at first for us, just like he was a model citizen at first for Dortmund. And my guess is he will be a model citizen for some time at Barcelona until that point in time where he doesn't want to be in Barcelona anymore,
Yeah, with the one difference being for Barcelona, unlike at Arsenal, he will not have the captaincy. He'll never have that. He'll never have the armband. He'll never have that responsibility. He's also 32. Again, it's on 6 months plus 1 additional year. So this is very much short term. This is very much where it's perform, it's show up and see what you can do beyond that. I was going to ask you about the captaincy and being stripped to it, but I mean, I think you hit that, where his professionalism is going to go as far as he wants to take it, as far as how long he wants to remain. And I think as far as whether his professionalism goes awry for Xavi, unfortunately, Barcelona, I mean, even I'd say unlike Arsenal, don't have the option. They're already dealing with Dembele, whether won't he play him. And so to add another forward to that with Ansu's long-term injury. So Barcelona did not have the luxury, if they're going to make top four, to potentially sit a player that around the edges might have a little bit of issues with their professional.
You could argue that Arsenal didn't have that luxury either, but Mikel Arteta, and some would say wrongly and some would say rightly, lives, breathes, eats, sleeps culture. Culture is important to him, and he will not tolerate it any other way. I think one thing, and this is sort of true of you guys, I think, but we have a very young squad of very talented young players, and their future is arguably more important than our present, because their future is our future. And having a disruptive disciplinary issue in the squad as the example for young players could have a knock-on effect of making that future less bright than it should be. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I'm saying it is a consideration. So a very unique set of circumstances led to this, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it is, again, funny that you say that when you say a young core. And I said, wait a second, are you talking about Pedri and Gabi and Nico Gonzalez and Araujo?
Yeah.
And so they are very much parallel right now, Arsenal and Barcelona as such. So as far as where Aubameyang, going back to the field stuff, because then just assuming he's going to play, he wants to play, he's going to show up and all this stuff at 32 years old. Already we're throwing out the recent injury or health scare that he did have, as well as having to come back from the African Cup of Nations with Gabon due to the COVID issue. But would you think that Aubameyang would be more comfortable playing as the striker or on the left wing in Barca's possession-based system? And you already did kind of mention that his first touch, his technical ability, is not going to wow Kool-Aids. It's not necessarily the quote-unquote, I think we overdo the Barca player type situation. But yeah, certainly he's there for speed. He's there for his physical tools.
I have to remember my memories of Samuel Eto'o are a little bit blurry at this point. I think of him as more of a penalty box striker, a poacher, a guy who gets on the end of stuff. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. You can correct me. I
think that, no disrespect to Obama, but I think Eto'o is just beyond that. I think Eto'o, if anything, is severely underrated in the era that he was in. I just think he was more technical than people give him credit for. But yes, he was so quick, so fast. He had the ability to physically overpower opponents. But his movement too was just his understanding of space was beyond beyond what Aubameyang.
I would say, if you had to say to me, is Aubameyang one of the best in the world at anything? I would say Aubameyang is the best if he is still, but at the peak of his powers, he was the best in the world, or at least one of the best in the world at finding space, at understanding when to make that last burst, where to, do I go to the back post or do I drop to the spot? It is amazing how many goals he scored for us where you're like, well, that's a tap in. And you're like, he got lucky. And you watch it again, you're like, no, he understood the way the play was building, and he basically had the intuition to understand where to be that would give him the greatest opportunity to convert the chance. So, I think if you look at him, I mean, I don't know if you do any expected goals analysis on the pod, but if you look at expected goals metrics and you look at him like at Dortmund, he had a season where he was literally like 1 expected goal per 90. That's as good as anybody, non-Messi Ronaldo category. That's as good as it gets in the world. He's had, when he first came to Arsenal, I think he was 0.85, then 0.65, 0.55. Those are still good metrics, but now you're talking about 0.35, and at that point, you're talking about much more of a mid-tier striker. And I think the biggest difference, other than the system, is he still using his first step right? Is he still able to get to the positions at the, a lot of people think, well, he's still fast, but I don't think that's how it works with these athletes. If I am an elite athlete and I expect to be able to burst at a certain rate, to get to a certain spot at a certain moment, and I lose a half step, I'm still incredibly quick. But my timing is now completely off in terms of when I can get to that spot, where I need to start my run to beat the center back. I'm seeing him not burst past center backs in quite the way he might have. And so I think all of that comes into play. But for me, if he's going to thrive, I think he has to be able to run the channels. I think he has to be in the box, or at the very least near the box. If he's going to be out by the touchline, if he's going to be on the wing, he will be not just not appreciated, he will be loathed, because he is not going to do anything for you out there. I think you probably have to play him up front. and hope that you have enough creativity around to get the ball into the box in space. Or if you're going to play him out wide, you have to overlap and overload on that side and let him push more towards the channels. An inside wide forward, not a true wide forward, if that makes sense.
Well, actually, I think that is beneficial for Barcelona. Jordi Alba wants to dominate that left wing. And we saw Ansu Fati, that inverted left winger. It's why in the last matchup, it was Iziabe who started on the right wing, started on the left wing rather. And then because he was playing too wide, he was switched over to the right. Ferran Torres of Man City was brought over to the left side as an inverted winger. So I actually do think that would wind up being a pretty good fit. And you mentioned even a 0.55 non-penalty expected goals. Adama Traore is coming in from loan from Wolverhampton. I said this on the earlier show at a 0.17, right? So that's one wing. And then Ousmane Dembele, even when playing this season, is a 0.32. So if you want to tell me that a new winger for Barcelona is above 0.55 non-penalty expected goals, yes, stats aren't everything, but just Barcelona need a player to put the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah, I will just say, like with Adama Traore, he's a player I admire, but I think like he's a very frustrating player because he has, he is the best dribbler in the world, period.
99%.
He will.
Yep.
He is going to dribble so many. He's like a bowling ball. I mean, if you haven't watched Wolves, and I don't know why too many people watching Barca would watch a lot of Wolves, but like, I don't know that there's a player like him in the world. And so I actually could see him being the perfect foil for Aubameyang, because if you put the ball at Adama's feet and let him dribble three guys and just create chaos and get to the edge of the box, and Oba can run into the space vacated by people having to readjust for this. The biggest problem with Adama is he doesn't know how to deliver the final ball.
Right.
Aubameyang could be standing on the penalty spot unmarked after Traore dribbled three guys, and he'll try to give it to Aubameyang and kick it over the crossbar. That's the Adama Traore problem. But I think the two of them feel tailor-made for each other in the sense that if anyone's going to open up spaces for Oba to find and stand in and be available in, it's Adama Traore. That feels like a match made in heaven.